Hi guys, so I wanted to show you a few quick tricks about how you can use Desmos and how to just get started with your functions in the first place. I have Princess Leia loaded on here. The first thing I would like to match is her jawline. I see it somewhat looks like a parabola, so I'd get started by putting y equals to x squared. When I have this parabola, now I know that I would like the center to move up so that it starts at 2 instead. Well, I know that to move up, I would need to add 2, maybe 2.1 would match even better. Then I don't want to shift it to the left or right. What I would like to do, though, is make this parabola to be wider. When you go in front of the x, you would try what number you need to multiply by. If you're not sure, just put a number in and see what happens. So let's say, try what happens when you multiply by 10. It does not become wider, it becomes narrower. So what I am going to do instead is multiply by a decimal. So let's try 0.2. That works pretty good. However, as you can see, the parabola does not go up towards the jawline. And I would like to continue using this graph. If I remove it, you can see that her jawline is a little bit squarish. So instead of having a parabola with x squared, why don't we try what x to the fourth looks like? Oh, look at this. If you do x to the fourth, the jawline would be a lot more square, as hers actually is. Now this parabola turned out to be narrower than what we want, so now once again I'm going to change that 0.2. Let's try 0.02. Oh, it looks like this is now too much. So why don't we try 0.06? Ooh, perfect match. Okay, well this line seems to trace the jawline relatively well, so I'm gonna stop messing with it and move on to the next line. For the next line, I would like to try to match this bangs. So I'm going to work on the left side of the bangs. I could try to do a parabola and then just move the parabola somewhere else. However, I know I'm going to use a parabola somewhere else. I'm going to try and fit a exponential function instead. So I'm going to start by typing in y is equal to 2 to the x power. This is my basic exponential function. I think that I could probably take this part of the function and shift it up to perfectly line out the outside of her bangs. Well, if I want to move it up, then I would have to add something. So why don't I add 3.5? That looks good. That looks really good. However, it looks like I just need to shift my function to the left a little bit. If I want to shift to the left, then up to where my x value is, I would have to add something. So how about +1? Look at this perfect match. I know that here at the ends, it doesn't look like it matches perfectly, but remember, you can always remove the image afterwards. As long as it matches with the other lines, that's perfectly fine. Okay, so now I have the left side of the bangs. To copy the right side of the bangs, I am going to highlight the equation. Control C on your keyboard is going to copy that function. Control V is going to paste it. Now I have two copies of the same function on top of one another. It looks like that if I just reflect this function across the y-axis, I will be able to match the other side. So in front of the x, I'm going to add a negative. Voila! We have a good match for the bangs on this side as well. Now, these functions continue on forever, so I need to make sure that I constrain them. I'm going to select the jawline. You can do that in many ways. For the jawline, we can constrain the values to be close between the blue and the green function. To do that, in curly brackets, I am going to add each of the equations for the blue and the green function. I'm going to highlight and paste. And I'm going to set this to be greater than or equal to y less than or equal to the other equation. Essentially what I'm doing is constraining a curve in between two different curves. Now my jawline is constrained in between the blue and green function. If I were to go back and change the values of my green and blue function, I would have to do that in the constraint as well. But it seems to work pretty good. The next thing is I need to cut the blue line. I'm going to show you a different technique here. For the blue line, if you click on top of these points where the functions intersect, you can borrow or see what are the x values that are constraining your bangs. It looks like they are negative 2.339 and 0. And in between, you want to see the x values. So what I did here is clicked on my intersect points, and I am constraining the blue graph in between these x coordinates. I can do the same for the other part of her bangs. Here, my x values would have to be between 0 and 2.339. So I'm going to add curly brackets, 0 less than or equal from x less than or equal to 2.339. And we have a pretty good match for our face and bangs already. The next thing that we are going to add is an ellipse, circle, maybe ellipse for the head. So let's start by typing in the standard equation for an ellipse, which is x minus 0 squared divided by, we can do divided by 2 squared. We are going to go back and change those values to adjust to where her head actually is. Squared divided by, let's do 1 squared, and an ellipse is always equal to 1. Okay, now I have an ellipse showing right here in the middle. This ellipse, as you can tell, is 4 units wide. Well, half of that 4 is 2. It was the 2 associated with my x value. It is 2 units tall. Half of that is the 1 that I typed in associated with the y value. Now, I know that I would like to move this ellipse higher up. So I am going to change the value inside of the square with the y. I would like to move the center to be at 5. So I'm going to replace the 0 with 5. Now my ellipse is up here. If I want to make this ellipse to be wider, then I need to change the value underneath the x. Instead of 2, I'm going to make that 2.8. Ooh, that is a good match. Okay. I also want to make it taller. So for the y value, definitely need to make it much taller. Let me try 2.6. Almost. Maybe even 2.8. And we can move it up a little bit. That is a pretty good match. And now to cut the ellipse, what I did to cut that ellipse for the head was I clicked on the intersection point between the ellipse and the jawline. I recorded my y value, which was 3.629, and I want all the y values that are above that intersection point. So I input y greater than or equal to that 3.629. And this is what cut my ellipse to match the head. The last thing I can show you on here is how you can shade. I'm actually going to record a new video for the shading with a different equation.